Hi, Juno News. My name is Alexander Brown. I am a director of the National Citizens Coalition. I'm a writer. I'm a columnist. I have a best-selling Substack that goes by the name Acceptable Views, and I am thrilled to be presenting Not Sorry to you, a new show on Juno News. And thank you to Candace Malcolm. Thank you to the whole team here, just industry leaders and independent media, and I'm thrilled to be a part of it. And why not sorry? Because, we're in a moment of speaking plain truths and speaking up for Canadian values, no longer apologizing, profusely. When someone bumps into you on the street and you offer that not sorry, now it's government messing with you. It's government bumping into you, and we throw out this we throw out a sorry. We can't be sorry. This is a moment of recovery. This is a moment to get our country back and to do a better job on all these issues. And there's no bigger issue right now than immigration. It's the topic of the day. It's been the topic of weeks, even during a summer slowdown. And I want to thank Juno and Candace for letting me focus on immigration right now and to open the show. And I have a terrific promo code to offer you, junonews.com/notsorry for 20% off. Doug Ford is in the news. Doug Ford is in the news for all the wrong reasons, as he often tends to be, and that can be a tremendous disappointment. On Friday, he made an ill-advised, haphazard asylum comment that all but waved the matador red for the country's asylum seekers and global asylum seekers to come to Canada to receive up to 100,000 asylum claimant work permits during an employment crisis and during a youth unemployment crisis, where no group of youth across the country is getting it worse right now than Ontario 15 to 24s. In Toronto, for example, right now, youth unemployment is 20%, and the real number is actually believed to be much higher. And so I want you to listen to Ford's comments.
Premier Ford, I'm wondering if you could expand on some of what you were talking about regarding the conflict between the federal government and the provinces over immigration.
I'll give you an example. I have a tremendous amount of asylum seekers that are up in Etobicoke and in the hotels. They're healthy, they're willing to work, they're hardworking people, but they're waiting over 2 years. And they're just sucking off the system nonstop, not their fault. The fault falls under immigration, that it takes over 2 years to get a work permit. I'm not waiting any longer. We're issuing work permits in Ontario for these folks to give back and contribute to society in Ontario.
Now, these were understandably very concerning to many. A question must be asked, amongst many others, and has been asked by policymakers, industry experts, folks behind the scenes. I've talked to MPs, MPPs going, wait, who the heck was asking for this, especially during this youth unemployment crisis, and during a moment where, to the federal Liberals' limited credit, they are making some adjustments to immigration adjustments that have been fought for by groups like the National Citizens Coalition, folks like myself, all kinds of great efforts. The Shadow Minister of Immigration right now, Michelle Rempel, has done a terrific job. So who the heck was asking for this? Thankfully, common sense Canadians, those like yourself who are watching this right now, we've been up in arms, because this was, if we had just taken one step forward on immigration and we're starting to bring down this foreign student number, the temporary foreign worker numbers, they're adjusting the PR, which is still too high annually, let's be honest. This would have been one step forward and then 2 steps back. And thanks to pressure from common sense Canadians, from, let's be honest, real conservatives on this issue, Ford has walked this back. He walked it back to start Monday. And I want you to listen to what he had to say about his needless asylum debacle.
What I heard last week was we're taking over the issuing of permits for people who are claiming refugee status. What I'm hearing today is, no, we're not doing that. That's too complicated, and you misspoke last week. Can you explain why?
Yeah, so what I'm saying, we aren't taking it over, but the people that are there, that are sitting there collecting, they're collecting welfare, they're collecting free schooling, free health care and everything. I want them working.
So what changed between last Wednesday and today? When last Wednesday you were fairly unequivocal, you said it multiple times that Ontario will start issuing work permits to asylum seekers. So today you're saying that's no longer going to happen. What changed?
Well, we want to work with the federal government. We don't want to take over the immigration system per se.
Can you explain how this got into the final communique of all the premiers last week? You said you all wanted to.
Yeah,
You said there was overlap.
Yeah.
Between federal and provincial responsibilities under Section 95 of the Constitution, and now you're walking the whole thing back, and it's just a plea for more support.
No, you know something, Rob? We're frustrated.
The issue at hand here, beyond freaking people out, and we already have kids across the country, but particularly in Ontario, who are handing in hundreds of resumes and getting absolutely nowhere, is twofold. One, funnily enough, is Ford. This was a dramatic misinterpretation of even his own asylum file in his Friday statement, in his statement going into the weekend. Ford mentioned that no one understands this more than the premiers. We understand our immigration file and our asylum claims, and we're going to start setting, our own numbers here. But he actually failed to understand, and I've heard from experts on this, that asylum claimants can get a work permit within just 2 weeks. We're not talking 2 years. So there are already those who are claiming asylum who have these work permits or choosing not to get them because they're getting a whole lot of money to sit on their hands. So that's problem one. Problem two was that, much like an infamous Justin Trudeau tweet after he was first elected, that sort of launched 1,000 ships towards Roxham Road, Ford was opening the potential floodgates for all asylum claimants inside of Canada to come to Ontario right away, and just this wave would have just crashed down on youth unemployment and all these positions even harder, and even encourage those who were looking around at what country to go to go to Ontario, and to compound these problems at the exact same time that the federal government is about to open up additional visas for parents and grandparents of new arrivals in the tens of thousands. So not only is our public service buckling, is it harder than ever for folks to find jobs? Are we seeing issues with crime and chaos and letting in just a whole bunch of predominantly young men who we've never let in before, some as legitimate students, but many as fake. And now many are filing fake claims for asylum when their visa's running out and they're being told they have to go back because the fake degree they got that isn't worth the paper it's printed on isn't proving fruitful in the job market. They were going to start welcoming hundreds of thousands of more, and wow, even the feds had started to do a little something here, and Ford was once again showing why Ontario conservatives, real Ontario conservatives, real Canadian conservatives, are increasingly frustrated by the actions of his government. I was happy to be in the Hub on Monday morning, first thing in the morning before this walkback started, with Matt Spoke of Project Ontario, and we together were writing about how the first job is disappearing and young Canadians deserve better, with a particular focus on Ontario and the Ontario job numbers that are grim. And it builds on the advocacy that I have engaged in with the National Citizens Coalition, which is Canada's sort of founding conservative nonprofit advocacy group, founded in 1967 by my grandfather. And he would have been appalled with what happened, with what's happened over the last sort of what we refer to as a lost liberal decade. But he would have been particularly appalled by the fact that the companies now claiming to, that want you to buy Canadian, and some of these folks waving new flags that they just bought on Amazon or Temu, and you're, pay for our stuff for cheaper, they're not hiring Canadian. And what Ford just attempted to do was compound that problem. There is a case to be made that, yes, having all these asylum seekers in hotels and the feds are finally set to pull funding for this, what the heck is he supposed to do with a problem that has largely been put on his front door by the federal government? But it wasn't this. No one was asking for this except for maybe some shadowy lobby groups, such as the Century Initiative, which is Canada's sort of mass immigration advocacy effort, which their corporate sponsors include 3 of the major banks and the Globe and Mail. Maybe this was dreamed up over his supposed late night campfire tale with Mark Carney during that first minister's week. This is a man that he ostensibly endorsed during the federal election, while Ford and some of his inner circle were busy lobbing bombs at the federal conservatives. And I know you don't recall asking for what he just tried to pull. And so many groups like the Coalition, now Project Ontario, they're fighting for the little guy here, Michelle Rempel, the Shadow Minister of Immigration in the House. She's been absolutely terrific. And the real concern here right now is that we don't want to be talking about immigration during a summer slowdown. There's supposed to be one. It's July. But there's a concerted effort to further undercut these kids, to further undercut our working class, our missing middle. And it's almost like they're trying to get away with it because they think you're going to be at the cottage right now. Well, many of you can't afford a cottage anymore because this is now a country that works for very, very few. And it seems that very, very few are trying to pull a fast one over July and August. And so it falls to us. It falls to well-informed Juno viewers and readers. It falls to the third-party folks like me, the writers, the columnists. Brian Lilly wrote a really good piece too. There's been great reporting in Juno News to try to course correct for this, to boop them on the nose. And it's been great to see Ford walk this back, but a conservative wouldn't have put this forward in the first place. And at what point do we throw up our hands and go, just say you're liberal. Just say you're an Ontario Liberal. And the question that I've heard lately from experts and those in government, MPs, MPPs, government relations is, and shockingly so, is like in the fight to sort of bring all this back to something more resembling the country once knew and that is more normal and productive. And, maybe we actually do build these energy projects or a few of them and pick a few more winners than we do losers for a change. Could Doug Ford be the last vestige of the Trudeau years? David Eby in British Columbia is certainly threatening to do the same. Wab Kinew wants to evidently stand in the way of a few of these projects, despite certain claims to the contrary. But if Carney is serious, and doubts of course remain, I have them myself, about rebuilding this country and getting it back on track, Ontario was and is by and large the dumping ground of all the bad ideas of the last decade. The Ford Conservatives were all in on the Trudeau EV mandates. They've gone all in on the diploma mills and the temporary foreign worker programs and have abdicated on key issues. They abdicated massively, as many of us know, during COVID. And part of why I do what I do and have expanded my work and I've been able to reach this audience is because COVID mandates, particularly Ontario, where I was living at the time, lit a real fire under me, where I'm looking at this conservative government going, you're the one guy who's supposed to have your head screwed on straight. Why aren't you a bit more like Danielle Smith right now? And that he isn't is the concern. And even the feds now are working to adjust these numbers. And Doug Ford is shooting from the hip, and evidently shooting from the hip not on behalf of the Canadian worker, not on behalf of unemployment that risks in Ontario going as high as 10%, where youth unemployment is 20% in Toronto, where towns have been transformed by these fake schools and just overrun by temporary foreign workers and foreign students at institutions like Conestoga, where they're all but studying basket weaving and hairdressing instead of STEM, medicine, the sciences, in demand high trades. And they talk about growing the economy. They talk about standing up in the face of tariffs. The premiers do. Well, when Ontario's premier is standing up in the face of tariffs and growing the economy, the only thing that he is doing is growing low-wage foreign labor replacement. The only thing they're growing is low skill and low wage. And so that GDP slightly goes up just because you're throwing bodies at it, but productivity is next to flatlined and worse than lowly Mississippi, worse than Alabama. Ontario is continually the sick man of North America economically, and immigration plays a massive part of that. It needs to change. And as an informed viewer and reader, I hope you read this. I hope you share it. I hope you give them a really hard time, because they deserve it. And why are we seeing certain policy wins or walkbacks from the Ford government, even changes to some of the proposed changes to federal immigration, which some have taken into effect, but others are expected for the fall? Unfortunately, it's not because they come to their senses. It's because you never lost yours. It's because ordinary Canadians notice how crazy this has gotten and continue to make a fuss. And it's such a shame that we have to do so, but it's incredibly valuable. There was a leisure poll published last week that showed that 57% of Canadians still feel that the revised liberal immigration targets are too high. But the real interesting thing within that poll, and talk to anybody in the public square, follow anybody but the subsidized media, and this is true, is that it is actually our proud immigrant communities, first, second, third generation Canadians, who have a bigger problem with this. In that poll, if 57% of Canadians think immigration targets, it's still too many, 60% of those who identify as immigrant Canadians, recent immigrant Canadians, they have an even bigger problem with it. And why do they have a bigger problem with it? There's an obvious reason for that. They came the right way. They came on points and shared values. They came for higher level opportunities, to build a home, to share in the Canadian culture. And now they are watching as 19% of the Canadian workforce has suddenly been made temporary. And they are seeing that includes a group of, let's be honest again, and let's be not sorry, a group of characters who are trouble. There's been really important reporting here in Juno News about some of these lenient sentences and some of these crime sprees committed by foreign students or temporary foreign workers, and how they're even getting just a boop on the nose because, these liberal appointed judges are not, when they're sentencing them, they're like, oh, I don't want them to be kicked out of the country. No, if you're a guest, you should be kicked out of the country. And what an insult it is to our proud immigrant communities that they are potentially lumped in with this graduating class from the University of Sean Fraser, Mark Miller, and now Lena Diab, who sully what was and should be again one of the world's great immigration systems. My grandfather, who founded the National Citizens Coalition in 1967, in his very first ad he put out to concerned taxpayers, this was during Trudeau 1, he finished with a sort of a call to action where he said, "If you share my alarm, your support is welcome." From there, Canada's trailblazing conservative advocacy group was born. This is a moment for all of us, and I'm really thrilled to be taking this message to Juno News and for all you to join me. This is a moment for all of us where, like, if you share our alarm here at Juno, at groups like the NCC, amongst the common sense community where we're all bigger than we think, your support is most welcome. Sharing this work is most welcome. Your continued advocacy in your community, online, most welcome. And to do all that here at Juno News, I would encourage you to take advantage of my promo code, very generous promo code. It's www.junonews.com/notsorry for 20% off. You are more than welcome to check out my work with the National Citizens Coalition at www.nationalcitizens.ca. And you can find me on Substack at acceptableviews.substack.com. I have been Alexander Brown. Thank you for watching Not Sorry.